Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Finding Me in the ITV networks. Islam is not about we're better than you. Rather, it is about let me show you something that might be or that is probably better for you. And that is how Muslims should approach and understand their religion. Also, in explaining and in sharing with others, it is important to remember this. Maintain a sense of humility. And with me today, I have two amazing sisters. Nadia, Nwabisa, Sigaba, and Luyanda, Sibisi, also known as Aziza, are two such sisters. When you meet them, when you chat with them, when you share with them, you will notice the humility. But what is more important and more dynamic in the encounter with them is that you will notice that they are always willing to share, to learn, and of course to approach a situation in a very humble way. So with that, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for being here with me.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You know, I think my life has really been enriched from the moment that I met the two of you. I mean, you have added such an amazing dynamic to it, and especially being young girls, you know, to see young ladies, youthful ladies, but in such a positive way, and in the way you interact, in the way you share, in the way you give out, it's really a blessing. And I'm hoping that many young people who are watching the show today will also take a lesson from you.
Inshallah. Our lives have been fruitful since we've met you.
Nadia, I want to start with you first. You and Nwabisa Sigaba.
Yes.
You became a Muslim in late 2007.
Yes.
And I would just like you to share with the audience, like, at what age were you when you accepted Islam, and why? Why did you accept Islam? What had brought you to Islam?
I was 19 years of age when I embraced Islam. I had just finished my matric exams. And I just had this engagement with myself and also my friends as well about what it really means to worship Allah. You know, and at that time we obviously were like, what does it mean to worship God? What does it mean to believe in God? So that is what sparked my initial interest in delving into this question and trying to find out what does it actually mean for me to believe and to worship Allah, you know, and that's how I stumbled across Islam, and the rest is history, of course.
It was a journey basically undertaken by yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And when you came to that moment of truth?
When I came to that moment of truth, what I did was a comparative study of various religions. It wasn't an in-depth study, obviously. I just looked at the fundamentals and the basics of each religious belief and what it meant for those religions to believe in God. And I also looked at Christianity as well, you know, because that was my main faith at the time. And I found some very disturbing, you know, truths and realities about Christianity that weren't sitting well with me.
You couldn't reconcile.
Yeah, I couldn't. And when I found out that Allah is one in Islam, it took me by surprise, because that is what I had wanted all my life, to serve one God and to have one God.
Subhanallah. Okay, your name, Nwabisa.
Yes.
Sigaba. If you can just, it's a Xhosa name.
Yes.
Okay, what does it mean, and what made you go, you have taken on another name, an Arabic name, Nadia. Also, if you can explain to us why you chose the name Nadia and what does it mean?
Nwabisa means happiness. If you put it in the context of a sentence, Nwabisa abantu means to make people happy. Okay. So I think my parents were just people who were looking for joy at the time when I was born. And when I became Muslim, I looked at a number of Muslim names. And I was particularly interested in the name Zainab, because I loved the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, Zainab. But what led me to choose Nadia was that I was at the beginning of a very long journey in my life. And when I came across Nadia, it meant the beginning. And when I chose that name, that's what I wanted it to mean the beginning of something new for myself.
Okay, but Nadia also, it comes from the root word nida, which is also to call.
To call, yes. Yes.
Okay.
A friend of mine asked her father, what does Nadia mean? And he said it comes from Nadia, you said. And he explained that it means to call people to something. So I also felt like maybe that's also the beginning of my calling as well. Islam was the beginning of my calling, and for me to call others into this religion, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so very quickly, Luyanda, I'm sorry, we have to go to an explanation of your name and, of course, your journey to Islam. You were born in Rockville, Soweto, in 1989. You went to the Regina Mundi. You were baptized in the Regina Mundi school, church, and then, of course, you went to Parktown. High school for girls here. Okay, so your journey was also very, very interesting. If you can perhaps tell us quickly, what led to that experience and how the change and transformation to Aziza.
Okay, I'll just jump straight into my high school years because those were the most, I think, shaping years for me. Going to an all-girls school like Parktown Girls was very, for me, it was the most important thing I did in my life because it was a very progressive school. The headmistress really encouraged us to be unique individuals and to affirm every part of you that you are. So I knew, I affirmed myself as a woman, I affirmed myself as a black woman, but there was something missing in my life, and I felt like I hadn't made a connection between my creator and myself. So I had no spiritual inclinations. I didn't go to church. I had no sense of belief in anything.
So did you feel empty inside?
I did feel empty inside. And I used to attend the Church of Scientology, which really focuses a lot on the mind. It credits the human mind a lot and says that the mind is the master of your being. And everything that you get in your life is accredited to the mind. So it made a lot of sense, but part of me felt like, but what about the heart? And Islam really gave me that link between the mind, the body, and the heart. And that really the link you have with your creator is through your heart.
Yes.
And that was what was missing for me, and I found that through Islam.
And from Luyanda to Aziza?
It was just a desire to be loved and to find a sense of belonging. So Aziza means the beloved. So I want to be beloved to everybody that I encounter, whether it's my parents, my friends, colleagues, my children, and yeah.
Okay, that's great, because you were talking about the heart, and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya said that, once Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, was speaking about the state of the heart, and he said, look for your heart in 3 places: when listening to the Quran, when seeking knowledge, and when in privacy. If you cannot find it in these places, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you with a heart, for indeed you do not have one. And so we're going to the break, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me on the ITV networks. With me today is Sister Aziza and Sister Nadia, also known as Luyanda and Nwabisa. So if you missed the first segment, these are 2 dynamic and amazing young women who explained to us about their journey to Islam, and we're carrying the conversation further. I'd like to start with you now, Aziza, if you don't mind. Considering this, that your heart felt empty and that you were searching to fill something, and I mean, you were baptized in Regina, and you were, you went to Parktown, you had a fantastic education, a very good upbringing, you were exposed to all of these, what can I say, first world priorities or luxuries that many people in South Africa till today do not experience, but you realized that there was something missing. Okay, having accepted Islam and focusing on this beautiful concept of Hub, the beloved, and taking the name Aziza, now, after this journey has begun for you, what does Islam mean to you?
Islam is life for me, because I took for granted the day-to-day things before I became Muslim. And after I took Islam, I realized that every split second of your being is ibadah. So for example, when you walk into the door, before you're Muslim, you just walk into the house. I mean, it's your house. You have the right to put the keys in and open it. But when you're Muslim, you have to acknowledge that this is by Allah's leave, that I'm even here to be able to open the door and walk into the house, to be able to, have a sip of water. I must acknowledge Allah. I must acknowledge in every single step of, from the beginning of the day to the end, it's all Allah.
So it's a consciousness,
yes,
and continuous consciousness.
And an authentic one, because you've aligned your spirit, you've aligned your mind, you've aligned your heart, you've aligned your soul to one thing, which is worship and
love of the Creator.
Yes.
Whilst you were saying that, and the realization that you need to be in Allah's presence all of the time, I remember reading a Jummah message which I got this morning, and it said that this school kids were asked to write what they considered would be the 7 wonders of the world, and so everybody was discussing, and finally they came to some kind of an agreement, and then they handed the paper to the teacher, and of course they wrote the Taj Mahal and the usual, the Grand Canyon, etc., and they had 7, and she saw that there was this one young girl still sitting there, and she was still writing, and the teacher said, "Are you battling? Are you still having difficulty?" And she said, "Yes." So then the teacher said, "Okay, but what have you written?" And she said, "Just hold on, I'm completing it." And then she completed it and handed it to the teacher, and there the 7 wonders of the world was to see, to hear, to touch, to feel, to taste, to love, and to love. And she said that if you have these experiences with you, then every single day you are experiencing the wonders of the world. Yes. Okay, so Nadia, also to you, what does Islam mean to you now after having taken this journey?
Islam for me means to surrender yourself to the divine. I was reading a lot of religious literature at the time, Ian Levanzant, Ronald Walsh. They were very profound people in how they spoke about Allah as the divine. So to surrender yourself to the divine will is what it meant for me to be a Muslim, was to allow, it was a combination of truth, trust, and faith in the divine law, to allow it to let me live to the fullest of my potential. Because once you submit yourself to Allah, you live a full potential life. You can be anything you want to be, because Allah allows you that space.
Now, having reached such a beautiful understanding about Islam and experiencing the love and the companionship and the fulfillment, we find today that, Muslim students have a role to play in the campuses. Both of you have been at campuses, both of you have taken higher education, you're completing your honors, both of you are working now in the corporate world, basically. What do you feel is important for Muslim students, to do in terms of the university environment? And I need a very quick reply. Maybe we can start with you, Aziza.
Okay, I think with university, it's usually a very shallow environment. It's all about yourself and how you can get from an undergrad to a postgrad. And I think that it's very important, because that's why you're there in the first place. But you're also living a day-to-day life. And I think that for me, one of the most important things that university students need to realize is that you need to connect with people, find out who people are and what they're going through and growing through. Because if you find that out about them, you'll realize that, wow, actually you have a struggle, and I'm here for 3 years and I can't be oblivious to everything that's going on around me in terms of who you are and what makes you up as a human being.
And I think that's very, very important. But there's also another dimension to the life of Muslim students, and that is we find that the continuous harassment that Muslim students are facing the world over. Alhamdulillah, in South Africa, we're still relatively safe, but it's coming as we see the experiences at the campus, especially at Wits University. We're going to play the video clip now, Nadia, and then when we come back after the break, I would like you to take this conversation a little further about the role of students, and Muslim students specifically in the academic environment. I would like you to watch this video clip.
Decision today by UC Regents after electing their first Muslim student regent. KTVU's David Stevenson live in San Francisco, where he spoke to the young woman about the criticism that she's received. David?
Frank, despite her election, a number of groups say this young woman is the wrong person to lead UC students.
Congratulations, Sadia, and we'll look forward to working with you.
21-year-old Sadia Saifuddin is making history. The Pakistani-American today became the University of California's first Muslim student regent.
I think that the UC is standing at a critical juncture right now, and it's really important for all of us to come together.
Her nomination split regents and a number of Jewish groups who say Saifuddin's activism in the Muslim Students Association and in calling for divestiture from Israel make her unfit to represent 230,000 students.
She shouldn't have been recommended and appointed. Her record is one of polarization.
I think the position on divestment is irrelevant right now. I think what's more important is talking about issues of tuition and equity and diversity.
The Simon Wiesenthal Center also criticized Saifuddin for sponsoring a student resolution condemning UC Santa Cruz lecturer Tammy Benjamin's 2012 speech on Muslim student groups.
These are students who come with a serious agenda, who have ties to terrorist organizations.
I am not going to apologize for standing up and saying that it is not okay for someone to say that I am a part of a terrorist organization.
The outside criticism prompted one regent today to withhold his vote.
I am not going to vote for Sadia, but I'm not going to vote against her. I'm just going to simply abstain because I am concerned and I haven't learned enough.
I will be definitely doing a lot of outreach to make sure that all student voices and concerns are being heard.
Saifuddin will have a 2-year run as student regent with the ability to vote.
We're going to an ad break now. When we come back, Nadia will take the conversation a little further, so we'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the final segment of Finding Me in the ITV networks today with Sister Luyanda and Sister Nwabisa. And before we went to the break, we played a short video clip which showed how Muslim students, especially young female Muslims in the United States, are targeted by Zionist groups who do not want to allow them that space so that their voices can be heard. And of course, that kind of a scenario is creeping very slowly into the South African universities when you look at academic freedom, and of course, when you look at what's happening at WITS in the current scenario related to the Israeli apartheid campaign. So with that, Nadia, I want to come to your answer. What do you feel is important in terms of the role of the Muslim student? I mean, you girls, both of you were on campus, you participated in the academic environment, you're politically active. Is it important for Muslim students to participate, to be politically active, to claim that space and to allow their voices to be heard?
Yeah, I'd like to just speak about, just expand on what Aziza said, and it's about awareness. You know, it's always about an awareness of your environment. You need to engage with people, you know, and if you're not aware of the issues within your environment, then you're not going to be able to speak out against them. You know, so as Muslim students, I think it's important that we become aware, you know, because, I mean, I encountered something when I had joined the MSA. It was very difficult for me, you know, as a black Muslim, you know, to engage with Indians, because I wasn't aware of my space. You know, I just thought I'm a Muslim and, you know, they're Muslim, so we get one another, you know, but it's more dynamic than that. So I think we need to create an awareness and to know what the issues are and to engage those issues.
And I think that's also important. It links back to what Aziza said. It's that constant state of consciousness. So whether you're conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time you're conscious of your environment, you're conscious of the political context, you're conscious of what other people are doing, saying or feeling. So they also empathy and tolerance, but at the same time being aware so that you can assert your rights and that nobody can trample over you. And you raise a very important point too, because I find that many Muslim students are so, as you said, Aziza, they come in just to get this undergrad degree and then they're gone out, but they're not realizing that they need to interact with other people and that they need to be aware of issues. And as a Muslim, we should remember that there's a consequence to apathy and there's a consequence to sin. In both cases, they lead to, you know, it can fall back on us. It's going to come back to South African Muslims. If we're quiet about issues of oppression or injustice, etc., we need to stand up and say, this is not right, because Islam teaches us that it's not right. But ultimately, it comes to that point of being conscious and being aware. Now, considering that, and Nadia, let's start with you. Politically speaking, what role should Muslims play in the South African domestic politics? Because if you look at the current climate in South Africa, we have, well, basically a pathetic leadership. We don't find much of in terms of hope for young people who are looking at it, and even for older people. There is so much corruption, there's so much abuse, there's abuse of state resources, and we know that the Gini coefficient in South Africa is worse now than it was during apartheid. The rich are exceptionally rich and the poor are getting poorer.
Yeah.
The divide between the rich and the poor is very, very big. So firstly, just as a South African citizen, and then secondly, as a Muslim, what do you understand about domestic politics and what do you feel should be our role?
I think, this idea of standing by and watching things happen, it's not really going to help you or the society, So I think South Africans need to also create an awareness for themselves as to what is happening in the world around me and what is happening in my society. What are the issues that I need to engage with? What are the problems that I need to face? What are the challenges that myself and my fellow South Africans are facing, in this environment? And secondly is to engage. It's not only about, varsity prepares you for the world outside, So if you don't engage from that level, you're going to find it difficult to engage in a societal level.
And do you feel that we should hold our leaders accountable?
Absolutely.
So if there's no other platform, then it should be at the voting box, isn't it?
Yeah. And I also think for Muslims as well, we need to provide a moral campus, for leadership. And also for society at large, because I think we need an alternative lifestyle, not just saying become Muslim, but offer something to people. Say, there's another way of doing things, there's another way of living life, because if we don't offer that compass for people, that there's different ways of doing certain things, then we haven't done our duty, we haven't done our role. And I think as Muslims, we need to engage politics at that level, at a moral level.
Also, yes. Aziza, I just, while Nadia was speaking, it just reminded me, because you're in the media field, right? Yes. You do editing and copywriting, etc., but you're engaged on a tremendous level in terms of the media. So the social media platforms are dynamic also to raise the issues, to hold leaders accountable, to start the stimulus on the moral compass, etc., and to say that as South Africans, the youth of South Africa, we are not happy with the way things are going, and we're going to hold you accountable. What else do you think, young South Africans should do, whether African, Indian, white or coloured, and of course, then again, from a Muslim perspective?
I think that what I've come to understand about politics is that it's become synonymous with power, and I believe that power corrupts. And people need to understand that when you want to engage on a political level, you need to go back to the initial intention of wanting to serve. So I encourage Muslims to really take it back to service. Not even necessarily starting political parties, because I always feel like that ends badly. But going back to service. If you look at campaigns like Leader Say, where normal individuals are just taking charge and saying, what can we do on a day-to-day basis? I'm an accountant, how can I serve? I'm a writer, how can I serve? Or, I'm a nurse, how can I serve? And service becomes part of change. Definitely. And I think that politics needs to go back to that and less about, the colours of your political party.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the Right to Know campaign and Corruption Watch, etc. These are civil society organizations that are actually encouraging and the citizenry to get involved. The Toll campaign, if you look at our OTA, etc. And I think in this way, when you encourage people to serve, you're raising an awareness, and at the same time you're saying, you know what, we're holding you accountable because you represent us and there is a voice. So we're coming to the end of this last segment of the first interview, and I want just perhaps if you can wrap up for us and tell us what you feel our contributions should be, both in terms of the global political context and what is happening now in Syria. If you look at what's happening in Egypt, Nadia, because you're an international relations student, how do you understand this and what do you feel about it as a Muslim?
I think we don't educate ourselves enough, about the problems that happen in other countries. And I mean, I won't exclude myself in that. I hardly follow what happens in Syria, and, there's a lot of emotional, things that are happening to people there. And if we don't create that awareness for ourselves, then we won't find channels in which we can help, because we need to get involved. I think involvement is one of the biggest things that people need. I mean, instead of saying to people, no, just know about what's going on, you need to get involved and interact. And, you know, you won't be able to do that. And I won't be able to do that if I don't know what is needed and what is happening there. So I
knowledge
think
is important.
Exactly.
And Aziza?
I echo what Nadia says 100%. We're always having conversations about we don't know. We don't know enough.
And we don't follow.
We don't follow. And this is a conversation we have every day that, like, you need to know more. We need to know more. What do you know? What did you learn? What are you learning? How can you demystify it? Especially because there's so much pressure on us I know my dad always says to me, so what's happening in Syria or what's happening in Egypt? And you under the spotlight to really, give the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you need to be aware about it, because I think the worst is that there's so many myths and mistruths and misperceptions about Islam. And then if you encounter a Muslim and you ask them questions and they cannot answer even further, then it just reinforces that these Muslims don't know what's going on and they don't even realize it. Yet we're an ikhwa, we're one ummah, and if one part of the body hurts, the entire body is supposed to be hurting, which shows again that we're not in that state of consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all states, because if you were in that state of consciousness, when a fellow Muslim is hurting, you will feel the pain too. Okay, but we have to end this particular segment, and then we're going to next week, inshallah, we will do part 2 of Finding Me, and I have more questions for you. So for now, I'd like to say Jazakallah khair for being here, and fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And until we meet again for part 2 with Sister Nadia and Sister Aziza, I'd like to say to all the viewers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.